Yo, what's going on today, Ghost here, and today I am bringing us another comparison video between the M13 and Krig. And I wanted to make this video because currently in Warzone we are going through a no recoil meta. Weapons such as the Farah, the C58, and even XM4 pretty much have no recoil. And a lot of people are actually going to dislike this type of meta because they just feel like you die pretty quickly, and people that use these weapons don't really have to struggle much with it because they have no recoil, as opposed to a gun like the AMX that required a little bit more skill. To be honest, I don't really have like too much of an opinion on this. If anything, I'm gonna talk about that a little bit later in the video, but I feel like the M13 and Krig are two weapons that have the characteristics of, or to be a part of this meta, but they're kind of like outcast to it. I know maybe the Krig, you can make an argument for the Krig, but the M13 not so much. And these two are like trademark no recoil weapons that just don't really get any love. And I would go as far as to say that this is like the underrated meta in season 4, given what these two weapons could do and given how they can match up with the other ones that are currently being used a lot. But before we get into all that, I want to say, if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 2,000. We just hit like 1.77k, so we're about like 230 subs away. So any sub helps. We very appreciate it. Also, if you guys can do me a favor of leaving a follow on my Twitch channel at alwaysghost_. We're close to 200 over there. So yeah. But with that being said, man, let's get into the comparison. And here we have the recoil pattern for the M13, which, as you guys can see, isn't that crazy considering the fact that it has a high fire rate. And if you take a look at a weapon like the Cold MP5, which also has a high fire rate, that thing shoots up straight up in the sky for its recoil pattern. But the M13 doesn't do that. And having a high fire rate with low recoil is a pretty deadly combination. But obviously, with that deadly combination comes with some drawbacks. For example, the damage. The damage is, pretty lackluster. That's probably like the only complaint most people have about the M13. And that kind of what steers people away from it. And I'm not going to lie, during the time that I used it, and this, I guess, last few days, I definitely felt the low damage. And what's crazy is because last time I used it, it didn't feel like this at all. And I know, obviously, they didn't change this weapon. I don't think they'll ever change this weapon. If anything, they'll probably nerf it, believe it or not. But I think they would, like, balance it out. Like, I think they would nerf the fire rate and nerf the recoil, or up the recoil, and then probably up the damage. But, that's just wishful thinking. I don't think they'll actually ever touch it. But besides that, when I was using it like a month ago, this gun was a monster. Like, I felt unstoppable with it, and I really was vibing with it. This time around, it felt a lot less effective to what I was used to. But that's not to say that this weapon was completely, like, useless. Like, this weapon had its moments, it had its definitely strengths, but this time around, it's just, I couldn't vibe with it. And I gotta be honest, I think it's because I couldn't really control the recoil as best as I wanted to. Like, again, a month ago, I felt like I was having no trouble with the M13, like, in terms of every aspect, even controlling it. But this time around, I kind of struggled to. And maybe it's because it's been quite some time since I used it. But I don't know. No matter how, I played for a long time, right? And I just, over that time, I still couldn't really get a hang of it. And it's kind of opened my eyes to another realization, or to a sort of realization where I think this gun isn't as noob friendly as I once thought it was. Like, you still might make the argument that it is because it has no recoil, but like, I feel like controlling the recoil has its own difficulty to it. Obviously, it's not as difficult as like the AMX or something, but I think it's not as easy as we paint it out to be. And I think it kind of requires a special type of skill to really make it shine the way it can. Like, this gun has potential, but I think only in the right hands it can truly shine with its potential. And I think it really just comes down to being in the mood to use it, or just being in the right time, because again, a month ago it was a fryer. This time around it didn't feel like as effective as I thought it would be. But in comparison to like a Farah or any of the weapons that are currently in the meta, like, I think it's pretty solid. Now I think the C58 might be a little stretched because that damage is pretty rough, and the Farah, maybe the damage too, but in terms of everything else, like, I think the M13 is definitely able to compete with those weapons. Even the XM4, just because of the fact that I think the range is up to par with the Farah. And if you, to be honest, like, I don't think the recoil or the mismanagement of controlling the M13 is as bad as the Farah is right now. So don't steer away from this gun. I definitely recommend you using it. I'm not trying to hate on this weapon because I've come to find some love with the M13. I know that there's some religious M13 users out there as well. So, let me know what you guys feel about the M13 currently, because, I feel like it's a solid weapon. Definitely able to compete with the current meta, as much as people might want to disagree with that. or as much as people might think that I'm reaching by making that statement, I really do feel like the M13 is capable of competing with these other ARs. Not necessarily take like the #1 spot or becoming the the meta, like the full-on meta of the game, but I think it has a chance of competing. But I won't lie, I don't think it's like a everybody type gun. I really do feel like I think it requires a special type of user to be able to flourish with M13. But anyways, with that being said, let's get into the Krig. And here we have the recoil pattern for the Krig, which you guys can see isn't too crazy, and actually I think it looks very similar to the M13. Some of you guys may not see that similarity, but for me, I feel like it's a very similar recoil pattern. I mean, it goes up, it starts to go a little bit to the right, it does come back up, but overall I feel like it's a very similar concept. And yeah, one of the things that I will say that I think the Krig definitely has over the M13 is just being able to control the weapon a lot easier. That's not to say that the M13 is like uncontrollable. Obviously it's not that uncontrollable, but the fast fire rate makes it easy to lose control if you're not really like able to control it properly. Whereas the Krig's steady fire rate, you don't really get punished that much. If you're missing your shots, that's really all because of you, not because of the weapon itself starting to shoot just weirdly and hard to control. But this Krig, man, this Krig has been in the conversation of a top AR for quite some time. I mean, ever since I would say it got buffed, I believe in season 3, it's been in the conversation. People have been taking note of it, and barrel updates for the colder ARs really help it shine. I know that it's kind of been overlooked by other ARs, but the Krig has definitely been a top AR, or at least in the competition for a top AR for quite some time now. And I feel like right now it's no different. I think right now, matter of fact, it fits in very well because, again, I don't think the top ARs at the moment are like overwhelmingly strong. It's not like AMAX where no gun can really compete with his damage. I think it's a very steady race right now, steady competition. And again, guns like the M13 and Krig have more of a easier time competing with the top ones right now than they would in like the AMAX meta. That's great, really great. I know some people though still won't favor guns such as the M13 or even Krig because they prefer things like the Farah or C58 or even XM4, but these two weapons are not to be slept on. I think both weapons are very reliable. Again though, I feel like in the right hands it could definitely be looking monsters, because I have a friend actually who uses the Krig, or used the Krig, put on a 4x scope on it, and I heard the 4x scope is pretty good on the Krig. I have not used it, I haven't had time to use it, but I will get to that eventually. And he actually ended up dropping his PR. He went crazy with it. Now, obviously, that's like a very small sample size to me saying something like that. But, just proof out there that that gun could put in work. And I myself have put in work with this weapon when I used it. And the gun overall is a really solid weapon. With the M13, I think they're two weapons that are easily able to compete in this current meta, or the no recoil meta, which is getting rough out there. I know more and more people are starting to complain about this meta, which is understandable given the current state that we're in, where anyone could really just point and shoot at you and get the kill. And many people just don't really like this type of metas where it just doesn't take any skill. I mean, look at the AUG and DMR. But I will say that this meta is 100% better than those two types of metas, because at least there's like variety and there's not one true dominant weapon. Granted that all the weapons that are currently dominant are pretty low skilled weapons. But I will argue that guns like the M13, XM4 require some type of skill to use, and not anyone could just get them and be godly with them. It's just how it is. But again, they don't require a godly amount of skill. It's not like the top 1% are the only people that can use those type of weapons and be successful with them. But not everyone can pick them up and do work with it. Well, at least in the M13, the XM4, I'll argue that anyone can pick it up and put some work in, but that's for like secondary purposes. Primary, a little iffy, because I've seen people say that the XM4's recoil, it requires some type of skill. But again, I'd also argue that it's not a crazy amount of skill and anyone could really do it. M13, it has more factors to it. Controlling is a little bit of a task, and then the damage aspect of it is, obviously still there. But overall, solid weapons, and the Krig and M13, I feel like they fit somewhat perfectly into this meta, given their characteristics. I definitely think they're definitely able to compete, and maybe some people might agree with me on that again, but you gotta give it a try, man. I'm telling you, you're not gonna be disappointed. You're not gonna be just outclassed by any other AR, because there's no weapon that's truly gonna dominate them. It's not like we have an AMAX running around and just gonna be able to destroy these weapons. Although some might say that the Farah might be that weapon, but nah, bro. Like, the Farah is good, but it's not that good where you can't not use it. And the fact that there's not one singular dominant weapon allows for weapons such as the Krig and M13 to be very competitive in this type of meta, and I would even argue them both being in top 5 conversation. But I think that really just depends on who you're asking. For me, I would definitely put the Krig in the top 5. The M13, my bad, I almost said M16. I would put around like the, if it's not the 5 spot, which I think it easily could be in the 5 spot. It just really depends on how I'm feeling or how my performance is with the gun. It's like in a 6 or 7, but it's still definitely able to compete with the top guns in the current meta. But again, that's just my personal take on it. And so I want to ask you guys what your personal opinion is on both of these weapons in Season 4, and what do you guys rank them in your top 5, or just rank them in general. So yeah, man, with that being said, thank you guys for watching, and I'm out. Peace.